My name is Clara Romano. I have been a nurse for over 30 years. I've held the hands of people at the edge of life. I've whispered prayers into sterile air. I've cleaned beds no one wanted to die in. But nothing prepared me for the moment I stepped into Pope Francis's hospital room. It was not grand. No golden crosses. No cardinals pacing outside. No choir music echoing from the walls. It was simple. A bed, a chair, a sliver of sunlight trembling against the floor. But the air was thick with something holy. It felt like stepping into the space between worlds. He was frail. The mighty voice that had once stirred stadiums was now little more than a whisper. But his eyes, oh, his eyes, were burning with a fire not of this world. When I entered, carrying my clipboard and nervous reassurances, he looked at me, not through me, and simply said, "Sit." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, a pulling, like the tide pulling a boat toward its shore. I obeyed without thinking, because some invitations come not from men, but from heaven itself. I was prepared for rituals. I was prepared to murmur blessings, to offer morphine, to ease the holy passing. But he shattered every script I carried when he said, "I don't want prayers. I want truth." I blinked, stunned. "I'm just a nurse," I stammered. But he shook his head, smiling gently. "Exactly. No titles, no masks, just heart to heart." In that moment, the Pope didn't need a cardinal or a scholar. He needed someone unarmored, someone human, someone real. He began to speak, not grand teachings, but confessions. He told me about a moment, decades ago. A broken young man had come to him, desperate for acceptance. But instead of opening his arms, he had tightened around rules. Instead of mercy, he had offered distance. The memory still wounded him. He said, "I was afraid of being wrong, afraid of breaking tradition, afraid that if I stepped outside the lines, God would be angry with me." And then, almost weeping, "But fear is not holy." He spoke of the private wars waged inside those who wear robes and rings. How expectation crushes the spirit. How silence from heaven can make the strongest knees tremble. How faith is often holding on when every answer vanishes into mist. "Holiness," he said, "is not the absence of doubt. It's the refusal to let go of love, even when heaven seems silent." I sat frozen. All my years of working among dying men and women, and no one had ever spoken so clearly about the loneliness of belief. His breathing grew shallower. He leaned closer, mustering the last reserves of his strength, and whispered, "Faith, it's not something you find. It's something that finds you, usually in the dark." I didn't cry because he was dying. I cried because I realized I had spent my whole life chasing certainty, and he was offering me something better. He wasn't clinging to a system. He wasn't defending doctrine. He was unveiling a truth written into the blood and bones of humanity, that God meets us not in our perfection, but in our surrender. We sat there together, in silence so profound it made the hospital walls seem miles away. The beep of machines faded. The footsteps outside grew distant. The ticking of the clock melted into nothing. There was just presence, and in that heavy, holy quiet, I felt it. God was nearer than the breath in my lungs, Pope Francis closed his eyes as if savoring it, and then he said, so softly I had to lean into hear. People think faith is about having answers, but real faith is what's left when all the answers disappear. In that room I saw a pope who did not demand perfect belief, but confessed real brokenness. A man of God who admitted that fear sometimes masquerades as holiness. A dying breath that carried not despair, but invitation. A final sermon not shouted from a balcony, but whispered from a hospital bed. Faith is not the absence of questions. It's the decision to love, even in the silence. After a long stretch of silence, I thought he had drifted into sleep. I was about to stand and leave quietly when I heard it, a faint whisper slipping between his lips, so soft I almost missed it. A prayer, not in Latin, not from a book, not for an audience, raw, honest, undressed. He said, God, strip me of every crown I try to wear. Tear down every wall I built in your name. Make me small enough to fit inside your heart. I covered my mouth with my hand to hold back a sob. This wasn't the Pope speaking. This was a child of God, naked and unafraid, reaching for home. After another minute, he opened his eyes again, eyes now shimmering with tears that made him look younger than I had ever seen him. And then he said something I will never forget. My greatest regret is that I spent too many years trying to protect God's image, when all he ever asked was that I reflect his love. I didn't know what to say. How could I? Here was a man the world had called Holy Father, confessing that the true holiness he sought was not perfection, but humility. He wasn't worried about how he would be remembered. He was worried about the heart of the church he would leave behind. Then, with trembling fingers, he motioned for me to come closer. And in a voice thin as thread, he spoke a prophecy meant not just for me, but for every believer everywhere. There will come a time, he said, when the church will grow obsessed with being right instead of being real. They will trade intimacy for influence. They will measure success by numbers, not by surrendered hearts. The faithful will be tempted to shout louder than the world, instead of loving deeper than the world. His hand tightened weakly around mine. Warn them, Clara. Tell them. The world doesn't need louder Christians. It needs braver lovers. I bowed my head over his hand, feeling the frail warmth of a life almost spent. I whispered, I will. Not because I thought I was worthy, not because I had a platform or a voice, but because I had seen with my own eyes what real greatness looks like. And it was not power. It was love pressed through brokenness. When the moment finally came, it was gentle. No drama, no spectacle, just a breath, and then another, and then no more. The machines beeped quietly, then stilled. And in that sacred quiet, I felt it. Heaven opening wide to receive a son, not a celebrity. A child, not a champion. A heart that had finally let go of everything except love. I stayed beside him long after the doctors left the room. Because some moments aren't meant to be rushed. Some goodbyes deserve to echo through eternity. I went into that hospital room expecting to meet a pope. I left having met a soul who finally understood that titles mean nothing and love means everything. Pope Francis's final message wasn't complicated. It wasn't political. It wasn't intellectual. It was simple. the world will know we are His, not by our debates, not by our certainty, but by our love. The ones who will change the world won't be the loudest. They'll be the ones who carry the quiet fire of real, sacrificial love. If you are still here, still listening, then maybe this story wasn't just for me. Like and share the story if your heart stirred even a little. Comment below if you want to carry the quiet fire of love. I'll pray over every single name. Subscribe for more true, Spirit-filled testimonies that remind us God is still speaking. He's still calling. He's still moving. And remember, it's not about being right. It's about being real. It's not about making noise. It's about making love visible. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. Because someone is waiting for the kind of love only you can show.